They said she was too young, too reckless, too untested. 28 years old, barely 3 years out of her first deployment, and already walking into rooms filled with men twice her age who thought her silence meant inexperience. But what they didn't know was that silence was the weapon she had mastered long before they ever learned to aim a rifle. Before we begin, if you believe courage isn't about rank, medals, or loud orders, but about the quiet decisions no one ever sees, then like and subscribe. Because what you're about to hear deserves to be remembered. The naval outpost in Kodiak, Alaska slept under a sheet of frozen wind the night it began. The northern lights burned faint green over the horizon, and the ocean, black and endless, pressed against the shoreline like something alive, restless. Inside the steel briefing room, heaters clicked and hummed against the cold, but the tension in the air made the place feel colder still. 12 men sat around a long table, all SEAL recruits, fresh uniforms stiff with starch, boots polished hard enough to catch the dim fluorescent light. They leaned back in their chairs, cracking quiet jokes under their breath, relaxed in the way men relax when they think the hardest part hasn't started yet. At the head of the room stood Lieutenant Commander Harper Lane. She didn't say much at first. She rarely did. Her hair was pulled back in a tight knot, stray strands catching the pale light. The cold had left faint color in her cheeks, but her eyes, sharp, gray, unblinking, carried none of the nerves the others expected to see in someone so young. She studied the recruits like she was memorizing the shape of their shadows. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but the quiet carried. "Tomorrow's drill isn't routine," she said simply, sliding a map across the table. "We'll be running a cold water under ice infiltration sim. Night ops. Zero lights, zero chatter. Success depends on one thing only, whether you trust the current or fight it." The map showed a winding labyrinth of submerged tunnels beneath an ice shelf 2 miles offshore, a place where the ocean pressed against the underbelly of the frozen world, where temperatures could shatter bone and breath alike. Across the table, Chief Petty Officer Riker smirked, leaning back in his chair. He was in his late 30s, thick-shouldered, confident in a way that edged toward arrogance. He glanced around the table, catching a few nods from the recruits before tilting his head toward Harper. "You're telling us," he said, his voice pitched just loud enough for the room to hear, "that we're trusting a plan you drew up, Lane?" Harper didn't look up from the map. "You're trusting the water," she said evenly. "Not me." The room went still for half a second. Riker scoffed, shaking his head, his voice dripping sarcasm. "Figures. Command drops a cold water op on us and puts a strategist in charge who's barely been out of diapers." A few of the younger SEALs chuckled under their breath, trying to hide it. One or two glanced down, uneasy, but no one said a word. Harper didn't respond. She didn't flinch, didn't defend herself, didn't meet his gaze. That silence, the one they mistook for weakness, had been her weapon since the start. Because what they didn't know, what even most of the outpost didn't know, was buried in a classified file locked 3 floors below the Pentagon. Operation Frostveil. 2 years earlier, Harper had led an unauthorized deep-water infiltration during a blacked-out recon op in the Barents Sea. 12 men, no lights, no backup, and a window of only 40 minutes to navigate under collapsing ice floes with enemy radar sweeping the surface. Every single one of them came back alive. But the mission went classified, buried under redactions and sealed behind signatures, erased from the record to avoid an international incident. Harper carried the weight quietly, speaking of it to no one, wearing her silence like a second skin. Now, looking across the room at Riker's smirk, she said nothing, because she didn't have to. The heater groaned against the cold. Someone coughed softly. Outside, the howl of the wind pressed against the steel walls, the Arctic night crawling closer, thicker, heavier. Later, Harper stood alone on the outpost's observation deck, the freezing air clawing at her skin, the ocean's surface pitch black under a rising half-moon. From here, you could see where the ice shelf began, stretching out into the dark like the edge of the known world. Below that shelf, the tunnels waited. In her gloved hands, she held a thin black folder, her mission briefing. She read it for the 10th time, though she could have recited every word from memory. The sim was designed to prepare them for an unlikely but catastrophic scenario: a foreign reconnaissance sub breaching restricted U.S. waters. The recruits thought this was just another exercise. Harper knew better. These weren't drills. These were rehearsals for nights the world would never read about. Nights where the difference between silence and sound could start a war no one saw coming. Behind her, boots crunched softly against the frost-slick steel. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. "You gonna stand there staring at the dark all night, Lane?" Riker's voice, sharp with amusement, cut through the wind. "Were you finally gonna admit this isn't your arena?" She didn't move. "It's always my arena," she said calmly, without turning. Riker stepped closer, folding his arms against the cold. "I've been doing this 15 years. Ice ops, shadow retrievals, counter-infiltrations. I've led them all. You're a strategist. You sit behind maps and charts. But underwater, at -15, when the current's ripping you sideways and your lungs feel like glass." He shook his head, smiling to himself. "That's when the real leaders rise. And that's when you're gonna fold." Finally, Harper turned to look at him. Her expression didn't shift, but her words came low and deliberate. "I don't rise," she said. "I disappear." Riker blinked, frowned. But Harper turned back to the horizon, ending the conversation without ending it. At dawn, the simulation began. The outpost shivered under a new storm front, the sky bruised with dark clouds dragging the cold deeper inland. 12 SEALs stood in formation by the shoreline, wetsuits sealed, gear strapped tight, oxygen canisters clipped to their belts. Their breath steamed in white bursts against the air, disappearing as quickly as it formed. Harper walked the line, inspecting each diver, her expression unreadable. When she stopped at the edge of the group, she spoke once, and only once. "From here on," she said softly, "you speak when spoken to, and only underwater if it's life or death. No noise, no chatter, no panic. Keep silent. Move swift. Trust the current." Chief Riker muttered something under his breath. A couple of SEALs snickered. But no one missed the flicker of tension in his jaw as Harper strapped on her mask without another word and stepped into the water first. The black ocean swallowed her in seconds. Behind her, 12 men followed. Far above them, hidden beyond the clouds, a satellite camera blinked awake, catching the movement beneath the surface. The drill was live, but somewhere deep inside the Pentagon, another set of eyes was watching. They weren't running a simulation anymore. Something was waiting under the ice, and Harper Lane was about to lead them straight into it. The ocean doesn't care who leads you. It doesn't care about rank, pride, or who carries the loudest voice in the room. It moves with its own rules, and those who don't listen to it vanish without a sound. That morning, Harper Lane was the only one listening. The water was black, the kind of black where light didn't exist, where depth swallowed everything and sound traveled like whispers through steel. 12 SEALs followed Harper Lane under the ice shelf, their bodies pressed close, air tanks humming softly, fins slicing through the freezing dark in synchronized silence. Riker brought up the rear, his jaw tight as his gloved hand brushed along the rocky wall, guiding himself forward. He hated the silence down here. It made him feel small, weightless, and invisible. But Harper moved like the ocean itself had been expecting her. They descended through narrow channels carved into the ice, twisting through submerged tunnels where one wrong kick could snag a fin and trap you in places that swallowed men whole. No lights, no sonar pings, no unnecessary movement. Harper led them by feel, every decision measured, every pause deliberate. 7 minutes in, the comms clicked. Static hissed through their earpieces before a thin voice cut in. "Lane, this is command." A pause, tight and strained. "Satellite feed just went hot. We have an unidentified submerged contact 6 clicks northeast of your position. Unknown signature. Could be foreign. Could be recon." Harper's eyes narrowed behind her mask. She tapped her transmitter twice, acknowledgement received. Riker's voice cracked softly over comms, sharp and impatient. "Wait, they're telling us there's something down here? Live. This was supposed to be a drill, Lane." She didn't answer. Her hand signaled the team to stop, bodies freezing mid-motion. Air bubbles spiraled upward in lazy curls, vanishing against the ice ceiling above them. She turned slowly toward the northeast tunnel, the one where shadows seemed thicker, where the water pulsed with faint currents unnatural for this depth. And then they heard it. A low, rhythmic hum, almost inaudible, vibrating through the ice walls like a heartbeat. Riker cursed under his breath. "That's no simulation noise. That's a damn engine. Harper turned her palm flat toward him, signaling silence. Her other hand made 3 quick gestures. Drop. Drift. Follow me. She angled down, pulling herself forward through a jagged cut in the tunnel wall. The water grew colder, biting deeper with every meter they descended. Frost bloomed across the inner edges of their masks. Somewhere behind them, one of the recruits' breathing hitched, panicked, ragged. But Harper's hand shot up, fingers curling into a fist. Stop. Breathe. Control it. And somehow he did. They reached the edge of a sharp drop-off where the seafloor plunged into a cavernous trench. At the bottom, faint shadows moved. Riker finally whispered over comms. Multiple heat signatures. Lane, that's a sub. It wasn't just a sub. It was sleek, unmarked, and silent. No national identifiers, no beacon, no radio chatter. But sonar pulses mapped its outline against the dark, massive and predatory, sitting less than 200 meters below their position. If it breached into U.S. waters undetected, it would slip beneath 4 restricted communication lines and leave the fleet blind. This wasn't training anymore. Command, Harper said finally, voice low, even, steady. We have eyes on an unidentified hostile class sub. Stand by for action protocol. There was a pause on the other end. Then the reply came, clipped and tight. Copy, Lane. But you are not authorized to engage. Do not provoke. Maintain observation only. She looked down into the trench again. The sub's propellers shifted slightly. It was moving. Negative, she said. Observation's already over. Without another word, Harper signaled the team forward, fins slicing through the cold like blades. They closed in, hugging the rock walls, blending into the jagged shadows beneath the ice. Then it happened. The sub's underbelly released a metallic glimmer, small, spherical objects sinking slowly into the depths. Riker's eyes widened behind his mask. Those are probes. They're mapping us. Not anymore, Harper murmured, pulling a compact EMP puck from her vest. She planted it against the rock face, set the charge, and gestured for the team to back off. 30 seconds later, the pulse rippled invisibly through the water, silent but absolute. The probes died instantly, their lights fading into nothing. The sub's sonar spiked, a panicked sweep across the trench, confused by the sudden loss of signal. Riker hissed through comms. Lane, you just lit us up like fireworks. No, Harper replied calmly. I made us disappear. Above them, the ice absorbed the sonar ping, scattering the sub's scan into static noise. For 30 seconds, they were ghosts in the water. 30 seconds was all she needed. She led the team through a blind curve beneath the sub, no one daring to kick too hard or breathe too fast. One slip, one misplaced light reflection, and they'd be spotted. But Harper moved flawlessly, her fins barely stirring the currents. Finally, she raised a fist. Stop. The sub loomed just 20 meters above them now, an iron predator circling, trying to reacquire them on sonar. Harper tapped her transmitter once, short and sharp. Command, you need to listen to me carefully. If this vessel crosses the shelf, it compromises multiple secure lines and exposes our northern fleet. Authorize countermeasure clearance immediately. Command hesitated. Static filled the line. Then another voice broke through, deeper, older, steady. Lane, this is Admiral Vaughn. You have clearance. Do what you came here to do. That was all she needed. Her hand shot up, signaling 3 units to break off left, 3 right, the rest holding center with her. They drifted into position like shadows collapsing around prey. Harper's fingers brushed the trigger of her underwater acoustic disruptor, a last resort device capable of blinding the sub's navigation systems for 90 seconds. She aimed, fired. The low thrum of the sub's engine stuttered, then fell silent, its systems momentarily confused and blinded. The massive vessel shuddered once, twice, before going completely still, drifting harmlessly in the current. Above, the ice groaned like thunder rolling across mountains. Riker whispered, almost reverent now, You just froze a hostile-class recon sub under the ice." "No," Harper said quietly. "I stopped it from finding us." The comm stayed silent after that. For the first time since she'd stepped into this outpost, no one questioned her. No one doubted her. Even Riker's voice had nothing left to give. Harper turned her gaze upward, where faint beams of gray light fractured through the frozen ceiling above them. Team secure, she reported calmly. Unidentified contact neutralized. Preparing exfil. When they surfaced 30 minutes later, the storm had broken over Kodiak, the shoreline battered with icy winds and sheets of freezing rain. The team staggered onto the rocks, shivering and silent, their faces pale and raw. Harper pulled off her mast, her expression unchanged, her breathing steady. Somewhere above the waves, a satellite camera blinked twice, transmitting encrypted images to a classified channel in Washington. She had done what even command didn't believe possible, navigated 12 men through black water, disabled an unmarked foreign vessel, and brought every one of them home alive. But for Harper Lane, it wasn't victory. It was preparation. Because she knew something no one else on that shoreline did. That sub wasn't alone. And this wasn't over. The debrief room at Kodiak was silent. The team sat rigid, wetsuits half-dried, faces pale under the harsh lights. Chief Riker stared at the table, jaw locked, speaking to no one. Then the door opened. 3 officers walked in, followed by Admiral Marcus Vaughn, head of Naval Special Warfare Command. His presence turned the air heavy. He didn't speak until he reached the head of the table, where he set a single black folder down. "Who authorized you?" Vaughn said slowly. "To deploy an EMP, engage an unidentified sub, and take command of a live-threat operation?" Harper stood at attention, calm as the sea before a storm. "No one," she said simply. "I made the call." Vaughn studied her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he opened the folder and turned it for the room to see. On the first page, stamped classified, were the heavily redacted details of Operation Frostveil. The mission command swore didn't exist. 2 years ago, Vaughn said, his voice deep and controlled. Someone led 12 men through collapsing ice floes in the Barents Sea, no lights, no GPS, no backup, and brought them home alive. That mission saved an entire carrier group from exposure. He paused, letting the weight sink in. That someone was Lieutenant Commander Harper Lane. Gasps broke the silence. The recruits exchanged stunned looks. Riker froze, his arrogance cracking, disbelief written across his face. Vaughn's gaze swept the room. Yesterday, she kept 12 more alive. She prevented a foreign vessel from breaching secure waters. She bought this country time. So let me make this clear. When she gives an order, you follow it. His words landed hard. One by one, the SEALs straightened in their chairs. The mocking smiles were gone. Even Riker, jaw tight, forced himself to nod. Vaughn shut the folder, tucking it under his arm. "Lane, pack your gear. Pentagon wants you back on black files." Silent work. Harper's expression didn't shift. "I figured," she said quietly. The Admiral gave a single nod and left without another word. The room stayed quiet for a long time before Riker finally stood, his voice low, stripped of arrogance. "Lane," he said, hesitating, "I was wrong." She didn't gloat. She didn't speak. She just nodded once, and somehow, that silence carried more weight than any reply. That night, Harper stood alone on the observation deck, staring across the endless black sea. The northern lights burned faint green above her, the waves breaking softly against the rocks below. Somewhere deep beneath that ice, the foreign sub drifted quietly away. She knew this wasn't over. The next time, they wouldn't send one. She whispered to herself, barely louder than the wind. "Keep silent. Move swift." The motto that had carried her this far would have to carry her further still. And somewhere in Washington, behind locked doors and cold steel, a new file was stamped in red. Omega lead assigned, Harper Lane. Because some legends are told loudly. Hers would remain silent.